I think the reason why so many people resonate with Kintsugi is because it's the beautiful example of embracing imperfection, right? So it teaches us that it's okay to have scars and mistakes. But not only that, instead of hiding the brokenness, you can show it and highlight it and still be beautiful. So it's the embodiment and physical reminder of that idea. And also, it's the tangible example that we don't have to be perfect to be accepted. Right? So by doing this art form, even in the shortened form, it gives you a glimpse of the process of mending, and you will appreciate that even the messy mending is a great reminder of the grace and the second chance that's given to you every single day.
This episode is brought to you by Pause, Breathe, Reflect, the app that can help bring more mindfulness to your everyday moments. Imagine what would be possible if more people could live more mindfully. Hey there, it's Michael. Welcome to the Kintsugi Podcast, a show for perfectly imperfect people everywhere. And this week we have another wonderful story of connection. We're going to dive deep into the art and philosophy of Kintsugi. It's about time, right? So this week, you'll hear my conversation with Kintsugi artist Miya Smith, who started in Japan, came to Michigan, and now lives in California. And her art is gorgeous. And I'll put all the necessary links in the show notes because it's a podcast. It needs to have show notes. So you can actually connect with Miya and learn about her workshops and her art and all that. And here's a fun fact. This was her very first podcast interview. Pretty cool, right? And one of the things I loved about our conversation is that she dove deeper into the urishi. That's the glue, if you will, the adhesive. We make a big deal, rightfully so, about the pretty gold, hence the golden repair with Kintsugi. But behind the gold is the glue that allows the pottery to come back together. And we all have that glue within us. As you know, I've talked about how we, across the world, here in America, we can come together in our Kintsugi spirit. We just have to find the right urishi to help us come together, and then we can paint it with gold. Hence, again, the golden repair. So if you're ready to learn a little bit more about Kintsugi, take a full breath in, a nice releasing breath out, and get to know Kintsugi artist Miya Smith. Hey Miya, good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Michael. Good to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. We're going to have a beautiful conversation about Kintsugi, and the one spot where I always love to start, because my wife and I love a good story about how people met. So I would love for you to share, how did you and your husband meet?
Yeah, so that's a little bit interesting, maybe unusual story. I'm originally from Japan, born and raised there, and I met my husband. He is American. His last name is Smith. That's why my last name is Smith. But we met in Tokyo. He was working there, and we met on the train on Yamanote line, which is the circle line that goes around in Tokyo. They used to have this crazy Halloween party on the train on Yamanote line the Saturday before the Halloween. And it just kind of like word of mouth thing. Like a lot of foreigners know about it from, word of mouth. And people just dress up, or some people don't dress up, but they just jump the train and like party on the train. And, people who are not part of this are like really, that's really not cool actually. Like it gets jammed and, some people are drunk, and that's like, I, if I see like a party train like that now, like I don't know if I will think it's cool, but it was kind of the thing back then. Like they lasted number of years. I don't think they do it anymore. Like I think the JR or police shut it down or something probably. But anyway, we met on the Halloween party train long time ago in Tokyo. So,
Wow,
yeah,
that's such a great story. Like I've been to Tokyo multiple times and I did not hear about that party train and I didn't
yeah,
know about the Halloween tradition. So I think
yeah,
look at that one train ride and like now look at you guys. You're back here in the States and
yeah,
the rest, as they say, is history. So I
yeah.
love
I
that. Thanks
guess
for
so.
sharing. I like
You're
just love
welcome.
how people find each other. It's just
Yeah,
it
interesting.
feels at times so random. So
Hmm.
well, let's get into Kintsugi. I thought, given the name of this podcast, it would probably be wise to dive in to the art form a little bit deeper and to the philosophy and speak to someone who knows a thing or two about Kintsugi. So I'd love for you to share your journey into Kintsugi. Like what drew you to doing this art in the first place? What was that pull?
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, I'm originally from Japan, but I've been living here in California for more than 20 years now. But before I moved here, though, when I was young, I was office worker in Tokyo, and um, then after a while, like I started taking metalsmithing class in Tokyo after work, and because a couple of my older friends from work, they were taking the class and they would show me the rings they made, and then like it was really cool. And like you can basically make pretty much whatever you want to make, and I was like, I want to do that too. So I started taking the class and I loved it, and I loved mostly making jewelry with sterling silver first, and then later like a gold and a platinum. But it's a method called fabrication, which means no wax, no casting, and just using the metal um, to make things and raw materials, and then or melting the metal to create your own wires and sheets and using those things to make jewelry. Um, but I really like creating something with my hands, and all the tedious stuff about metalsmithing, like sawing, soldering, hammering, sanding, polishing. I just loved all the industrial side of it, and I love tools. So like all the tools, like I can never have too many tools. But I find it very rewarding to put my time and effort into something and have something tangible to use or to enjoy at the end. So for that same reason, I also love cooking and baking. So you get to enjoy what you put your effort into.
Yeah, you put
But
effort in and you get some
yeah,
enjoyment and yeah, you get some
yeah.
joy coming from it. That's so
Hmm.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I, moved around in the U.S. and Japan with my husband's job, and but over the years, I've always continued doing metalsmithing, like finding a class wherever I'm, lived or things. And but in Michigan, when we lived in Michigan one time, like I worked for this goldsmith in Michigan and doing repairs and bench work, and I learned a lot about repair, it was jewelry repair there, and I find that I really like repairing things, like making it useful again, something that's broken, but then making it useful again. And then also in Japan, I went to this platinum smith studio, and he taught me a lot about fine jewelry using like diamonds and semi-precious stones. So I learned a lot over the years and have been a metalsmith for a long time. And then when I learned about Kintsugi, which is probably about 10 years ago, so I can't remember exactly when the moment, but I probably saw it on social media or website or something first. But when I learned what it is, like I was immediately intrigued and wanted to try because I love working with metal and it's Japanese and I'm Japanese. So I was like, I should do this. Or more like, if I don't do this, like who's gonna do it, kind of thing. So it was almost like a calling and like, oh, I gotta do this kind of thing. And then I was like, how can I learn this? Because there's no teacher here in California. So I did a lot of research, and I won't go into details, but I actually had a hard time finding a class that in Japan that would fit my schedule or location when I visited Japan for the summer. So I kept researching, but I had a hard time finding something that worked for me. So one year I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I, went back to Japan next time and got all the necessary materials and tools from urushi suppliers in Japan, and started trying traditional kintsugi back here in California on my own. And this was about 6, 7 years ago. But to my surprise and delight, it came to me kind of naturally because I was already used to the precise and detailed work of metalsmithing. And, metalsmith can tell you, like, they know how the fundamentals about sanding and polishing. So I really liked it. I loved the process. I loved the slow process of kintsugi and that it is not instantaneous. It takes time to finish, and you have to wait for it. So I think that pace fits me and my lifestyle. So that's kind of like how I came to know and got started doing Kintsugi.
Wow, that is so cool. Like
Hmm.
you're self-taught. I'm
Yeah,
like,
basically.
that is so impressive. And just what a commitment, really, to your point, like a calling of like, you discover this art form,
Mm-hmm.
obviously a connection back to your heritage, and then you fly back. Of course, you have family still back in Japan, so a reason to go back, and then you bring it all to California and you teach yourself how to do it. I think that is absolutely fantastic. If we could dive into a little bit more of the historical significance of kintsugi, can you share what you know about the origins of kintsugi, like how it came to be an art form in Japan?
Um, yeah. So for those who don't really know, kintsugi is an ancient Japanese art form of mending broken vessels. And kin means gold in Japanese, and tsugi means to put together. So it literally means to put together with gold. But it's actually not the gold itself that binds the broken pieces together. So I'm talking about the traditional authentic kintsugi here. Um, for gluing the pieces together, we use this material called urushi, which it is a tree sap from the urushi trees. And urushi trees grow only in Asia, mainly in Japan, China, and Korea. And you actually harvest this natural urushi lacquer, but by making cuts on the tree trunk and then harvest the sap that the tree believes actually. So it it's like you using the tree's blood to do the mending.
Oh wow, that's
Um,
wild. So it's
yeah.
just for clarity. So for folks here in the States, they might know like a maple tree and maple syrup.
syrup. Yeah.
It is it is it in that same spirit? The
Yeah,
reishi tree has a syrup like that that
it's
becomes the
similar. Yeah,
lacquer.
it's the sap. Yeah, it's the sap
Okay.
from the tree that's the urushi. And but it's a very unique and labor-intensive process. In fact, after you plant a small tree, you have to wait like 10 to 13 years to grow and for before you can make cuts and harvest urushi sap. And only you can only harvest during like summer months, like from June through September, October at the latest. And each tree only gives like 200 cc of urushi sap. So it's very precious material. And with the development and because it's very labor intensive, the number of people who are working as a urushi harvester are decreasing. So it's the production of domestic urushi in Japan has been like decreasing over the years. It's a pretty big problem for urushi industry, but that's another story. But I will I will like talk about that part later in the podcast probably. But so urushi is a very interesting material that has naturally adhesive. So it has a great bonding and waterproofing capabilities. And ancient people in Japan or other parts of Asia had known this had discovered this, and they have been using this to coat like tools and vessels and wood and accessories and sometimes buildings for thousands of years. In fact, there are some archaeological artifacts that are like, thousands of years old, as old as like 10,000 years old, that still have urushi on them, and the wood inside the artifacts had rotted away and gone, but the urushi coating is still there.
Oh
So
wow,
that's
that's so
like
wild.
that's how durable urushi can be. It's amazing material. But urushi is also highly allergic. So it's the same family as like poison ivy or poison sumac. So most people will get a rash when you have direct contact with them, the sap. So you want to wear gloves to handle it if you're a beginner. Um, Over time, like urushi craftsmen will develop immunity, so they are not allergic to them anymore. So they can, use the bare hands to work on it. But yes, but it's very allergic. But the once it's dry, it's not allergic anymore. So you can touch the finished lacquerware fine, like no problem. You don't get a rash. So that's very unique. And also, interestingly, urushi dries up in a humid condition. So you have to add humidity for it to harden. So, and it's a very interesting, fascinating material to work with. So urushi. So going back to the history of urushi and kintsugi, urushi has been around for thousands of years in Japan, but it wasn't until like 15th century. Uh, uh, you have to wait till then to for the kintsugi to be born. And so the story goes like this. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but this is the kind of legend that as the origin story.
We'll go
So
with the
during
legend, Mia. That's totally
yeah,
cool. Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
So during the Muromachi period, which is in late like 15th century in Kyoto, Japan, this shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa had this beautiful celadon tea bowl from China that has been passed down to him for generations. But it was cracked, and so he sent it to China and asked for the same one because he liked it, but it was cracked. So by that time, China was under a different dynasty from the time that tea was created. So they replied to him that they no longer have the kiln or facility or the craftsmen to recreate this. So they sent the bowl back to Japan with staples in it. And the shogun didn't like that. So he ordered his craftspeople to do something about it. And they say that that's how Kintsugi was born. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so urushi's been around to mend things before, but also makie, which is another art form to paint with urushi on lacquerware to decorate it. That's been around too, but it wasn't until then that the urushi mending and highlighting with gold, with urushi, uh, got together and became kintsugi. So yeah, but that interesting thing about this story is that that Chinese celadon bowl is not the first kintsugi vessel because it's actually still sitting in the National Museum in Tokyo with staples in it. So that is not the
Oh,
first kintsugi vessel. They must have
wow.
used something else, right? But
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
still, like I'm not sure how true it is, but I think it is still a very interesting story. Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting story. And who among us hasn't had like a favorite glass or a teacup or a coffee mug or even a plate that, breaks and we want to repair it in some ways. Staples are a very innovative way of going about the
Yeah.
repair, but just, you know, what I love about Kintsugi is, especially through the lens of today's culture where we throw everything away when it breaks, we're trying to preserve it and, just overall
Hmm.
message of it. And I also love just how slow the process is from even growing the tree to when the tree, as you shared,
Yeah.
is ready to harvest the urishi, and just the whole process of making the kintsugi is just, it's slow in a world that seems to be going faster and faster and faster. So
Yeah.
I was hoping you could share a little bit more about the actual process. So what's,
Hmm.
people see the arts, they see the pottery,
Yeah.
they marvel in it, and they say, oh, that's so beautiful. But many don't know how it's actually created. So can you walk us through how a piece is actually created, like what's involved in doing so?
Yeah. So speaking a little bit more about the culture and the kintsugi, the background of kintsugi. So it was around that time that other Japanese core culture or art was developed. Like tea ceremony was being developed around that same time, and with the concept of Zen Buddhism, especially with the idea of wabi sabi. So kintsugi became very popular in tea ceremony too. So wabi sabi a finding is to find beauty in like humble things, like also like rustic things, old or simple or natural, worn and imperfect things, impermanent things. So kintsugi fits this concept of embracing imperfections and finding beauty in worn and simple things. And this Shogun Yoshimasa was a terrible ruler as a politician, but he was a great protector of arts and culture. So during his reign, many art forms blossomed, and some are now what we consider as the traditional Japanese culture. Like for example, like tea ceremony, and
Yeah.
also sumie, which is like ink painting, sumi ink painting, and also like wabi-sabi concept and architecture. The traditional Japanese architecture is said that is from around this period, how the tea rooms are built, and of course kintsugi. So you can say that like this shogun created the bedrock of Japanese aesthetics, and for that, like we owe him. And I'm thankful that he had a passion for it. it's somebody with that power, like authority, with the passion to invest in the arts and culture. That's when like actual change happens, right? So like I'm
Yeah.
thankful for his passion for that. Yeah, and I was in Japan this summer, and I went to Kyoto as well, and I went to uh, Ginkakuji, which is a silver pavilion, which was constructed by him. So that was kind of like my personal pilgrimage to the Kintsugi story, and it was very meaningful to
That's
me.
so
Yeah,
cool. Oh,
yeah,
that's so. Oh, I love that.
yeah. So, speaking of the process, so I will explain the authentic and traditional Kintsugi process. But I also teach modern and simplified Kintsugi workshops as well. But traditional Kintsugi is what I do as my own art form. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about the traditional Kintsugi. But yeah, the absolute essential main material is urushi, know, the natural tree sap. So it starts with that, it ends with that. So the whole mending process takes at least a few months for even for a simple mending. And because urushi takes time to dry or harden, and it hardens slowly in humid conditions. So each little step of the process, when you apply or use urushi mixture, you have to wait for days or sometimes weeks for urushi to harden before moving on to the next step. So sometimes complicated mending could take like 6 months to a year or more. So that's not that unusual, depending on the artist's workload. Like some people get a lot of, commission work sent to them and they're busy, and sometimes they have to stop accepting, new work. But yeah, it could take a long time. So the process goes like this. The first, you put together broken pieces. In order to do that, you mix wheat flour and water and use the gluten power of the flour. And then you add raw urushi to that and create the gluing urushi paste, and you
Ah,
use
okay.
the urushi paste to put the broken pieces together, and then you have to wait for 1 to 2 weeks for the urushi mixture to completely harden, and then you clean it up and sand it smooth, and then depending on the vessel, you create a different urushi paste using the raw urushi, and then adding natural other materials like clay powder or fine sawdust or linen fiber or stone powder and different things depending on how deep or the big the chip or gap is. So you use those pastes to fill the gap or chip, and you have to do it gradually. You can't just build it up in one step and then move on. Like you have to apply and then let it harden for days, and then uh, sand it and polish it. So um, there's a waiting time and then sanding and polishing in between each little steps, between these, like filling the cracks, filling the gap. And then after that, you finally apply several coats of finishing urushi lacquer, which with drying and polishing time in between. And then at the very end, you apply the last finishing coat of urushi and then gold powder or whatever the metal powder you're applying. So the gold comes at the very end of the process. Yeah. But it is the most dramatic and rewarding part of kintsugi. So
Yes.
yeah.
So knowing that Urishi is very scarce, as you mentioned earlier, there's a labor shortage. It takes so long for the tree to mature to harvest it. Do you know? I'm assuming you're getting like right now your rishi from Japan. I'm not sure if you can buy it in the states, but I'm just sort of curious. What would it? what would it cost for the urishi? My sense is this is a very expensive lacquer because the quantities of it are so limited.
Yeah. So interesting facts are that right now most of the urushi used for urushi crafts in Japan, like about 90 to 95%, are imported from China. So
Oh
they
wow!
have a
Everything comes from China.
big forest, and then the Japanese urushi refiners have the quality control, and they import the urushi lacquer from China, and they process it. They, you know, make sure that it's up to the standard, and because the urushi, domestic Japanese urushi is got getting rare and rarer and then more expensive, so it is not sustainable to use only domestic urushi for all the crust people to make lacquerware because it's not enough. Several years ago, Japanese government actually enacted a law to use only domestic Japanese urushi to restore the historical buildings. So most of the Japanese domestic urushi are reserved for restoring temples and shrines and old buildings like that. So um, the a few number of people, like crafts people, still use domestic urushi for their crafts, but most of them we use the urushi imported from China, which is very good quality to make everyday lacquerware. So I use the urushi, imported urushi, uh, then purchase it from the urushi refiners in Japan. So those are mostly the most of the urushi crafts people and kintsugi artists use that type of urushi.
Gotcha. Like it is really incredible. Like how much stuff that we have in our lives all comes from China, including
Yeah,
like
true,
traditional
true.
Japanese urishi. So
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's a
So
big
like a small,
surprise.
even like a small tube of it, like import urushi is, I would say, the raw urushi is probably about. I don't have a like an accurate number because I don't it's gone up a lot in the recent years. But say it's like $20 for a tube, like a small,
Ah,
tube. But then if it was a domestic urushi in that size tube, it will probably be like $100 ish. So it's a lot more if you wanted to get domestic urushi. So for those
if you want
crafts
to get
people who
the real stuff, yes.
yeah, for those craftspeople who use only domestic urushi, they say it. Of course, they say it because they take pride in using the domestic urushi only. So yeah, if it doesn't say anything, then it's probably import urushi. So yeah,
Okay.
but it's still very rare. I mean, precious material to work with.
Yeah, it brings
Yeah.
so much to
Yeah.
the art form
Yeah, and they're also
because it is
about
so rare. Yeah, yeah,
also about like all the tools that come with kintsugi, and that's like it's interesting craft. Yeah.
absolutely. So
Mm.
when you think about Kintsugi and the message it sends, especially in like today's society with like this quest for perfection, and I love the fact that you referenced Miya Wabi Sabi, which I just love that concept too. But you see things on social media, just you see things even like from artificial intelligence. Everything seems to be through a filter, so perfect. And for you as an artist, and you meet people you introduce Kintsugi to, I would love for you to share like how do they react to it, and just what do you think the message is from Kintsugi that we can bring into the time that we're living in.
Mm.
Just the philosophy, because nothing really is perfect, but we
Mm.
tend to strive for perfection all the time. It's almost like a disease that we have.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, most people, when they see Kintsugi art for the first time, it's like just like, wow, basically. It is definitely beautiful to see, the work of some of the Kintsugi artists. And yeah, one time I was about to do a workshop for a grief community at a church, and the pastor introduced this lady to me. She could not attend the workshop because she has a small child, but wanted to hear what it was about. Then I, you know, showed it to her, some of my like a sample vessels, and then he told me that she had lost her husband to suicide very recently. And when I showed her the vessel and explained what Kintsugi represents, and she just started crying, saying, "It's so beautiful, it's so beautiful." And like that was the most emotional yet beautiful reaction to Kintsugi that I have ever seen, and I will never forget that. It was very impactful to me that like something, a mending can have such an impact on somebody's life. Um, yeah, and then yeah, how yeah, a lot of as you have probably seen yourself, there's so many people resonate with Kintsugi, and I so I do Kintsugi workshop as well, a modern and simplified Kintsugi workshop, in different places and contexts. Sometimes it's at the cultural center, or sometimes it's at a church retreat or support groups, and participants come. You know, sometimes it just to learn the techniques and process of it. They just want to learn how to do this. But oftentimes, especially when I do the modern Kintsugi workshops, they come to experience the mending in order to process their own life journey. So I think the reason why so many people resonate with Kintsugi is because it's the beautiful example of embracing imperfection, right? So it teaches us that it's okay to have scars and mistakes. But not only that, instead of hiding the brokenness, you can show it and highlight it and still be beautiful. So it's the embodiment and physical reminder of that idea. And also, it's the tangible example that we don't have to be perfect to be accepted. Right? So, by doing this art form, even in the shortened form, it gives you a glimpse of the process of mending, and you will appreciate that even the messy mending is a great reminder of the grace and the second chance you that's given to you every single day. So I tell people to take the vessel home and put it where you can see every day, because it's a visual reminder for you every day.
Yeah,
And
I have my bowl here.
yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Awesome,
So it's
awesome.
right on my desk, and it's a reminder. Of course, I have my
Yeah.
own, as we've talked about. I have my own scars on my body, and those are my own
Mhm.
version of scars and my golden repair. But I keep
Yeah.
my Kintsugi vessel right here on my desk, just as a reminder that it's perfectly fine to be imperfect. We are all imperfect beings.
Yes.
And I love what you said, the messy mending. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's totally like, yeah, I do workshops for a retreat, like grief support community, or for mothers who have a child with mental illness, or people with chronic pain, or a single family, single parent community. So they all have, brokenness. I have brokenness. I'm not perfect, and you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? So it's natural that so many of us resonate with Kintsugi, and because we all need it. We all need the grace that Kintsugi represents. Right?
Yeah, I love that. We do all need the grace. I think when we go back to even the pandemic, something that we all experienced, because some of the beautiful work that you do with those groups, single moms, support groups of various forms, but just some trauma maybe from our youth or different parts of our lives. So maybe not everyone can appreciate each individual group like that, but we can appreciate, because this was a shared experience, going through the pandemic and how
Mm-hmm.
we cracked and there was a gap and we broke in
Mm-hmm.
so many ways. I do think like current day, kintsugi can be a beautiful metaphor for us to find a way to come together and
Totally.
really celebrate that we might have broken through a lot of different in a lot of different ways, but we can find a way to come together and we celebrate that messy that messy mending, which I think I will be using as we go
Mm-hmm.
forward. But I just, yeah, when I share kintsugi with other people, the light bulb goes off, and they're like, "Oh yeah, wow, that's so cool," and that's such a great concept. And I love the fact that you're doing workshops because it's a beautiful way of sharing the story of kintsugi with others.
Yeah, yeah. Often tell people in the workshop that you don't have to, you know, uh, copy the other people doing. Like this is your own mending. So it doesn't have to look like my sample even, like this is your own mending. So each vessel is broken in a unique way. Not one brokenness is the same. So your mending is your own too. So the mending has to be according to the brokenness, right? So each one is different.
Absolutely,
So you
yeah,
don't have to, yeah, make it like somebody else's.
yeah. That's so true. So we'll round out our conversation, and Mia, thanks again for joining. If someone wanted to begin learning more about kintsugi, I think this is a great start, our conversation. What advice would you have to someone who wants to dive a little bit deeper and learn more about it? Do you have any places that they should go, any websites or resources that you can recommend?
Yeah, I would say like um yeah, I would say just have an open mind and like be patient and give yourself some grace, because I say be patient because you might, find a kintsugi workshop and think this is a modern kintsugi, an easier kintsugi, and then think it might be easy, but you find it kind of like difficult. You're gonna face a little bit tricky part that, oh, my pieces didn't fit quite right, or like I can't sand this part or whatever. So give yourself some grace and some be patient, and each mending is different, like I said before. So you don't have to achieve the look you want in one session, and it takes, might take more effort and time than you anticipated. But yeah, so have an open mind. And then also, I tell this to the participants of my workshop too, but you are not doing this mending kintsugi to put the broken vessel back to what it was before. And you're going to create a totally new thing today. So you don't have to make it perfect like it was before. You have to do this as who you are right now. So mended vessel is a new creation. So
Yes.
that's a good posture to be like before you start. Like it takes the pressure off some people. Like, oh, I have to make it all pretty and presentable and Insta worthy or whatever. So that's like this is your own, and you can do more if you want to down the road. But this is your start. That's a good posture. posture to be in. And yeah, just like, yeah. Another thing, yeah, I guess that's the good start. There are a number of Kintsugi workshops, I guess, around the country now, because it's been very popular. And they are, most of them are, I would say, modern or simplified Kintsugi. It's finished in 2 or 3 hours. Um, that's um, that's not a bad way to start necessarily. Um, yeah, so I do both. I do modern simplified kintsugi workshops as well as the traditional. I can teach traditional kintsugi as well. But I want my main, I guess, message on doing all this is like I want people to know more the about urushi and its craft and culture.
Yeah.
So if you I've done kintsugi, modern kintsugi before, and I will want people to step into learning the traditional kintsugi sometime if you want to. Um, I want the modern kintsugi workshop to be a stepping stone to learn deeper about traditional kintsugi and urushi. And I know sometimes modern kintsugi gets a bad rep because it's not authentic, and people think it's like almost like evil because it's destroying the Japanese culture or it's not the real deal. But I get the argument too as someone who does a traditional kintsugi. But I think it depends on how you use it. So like, it's in my workshop I explain the differences between modern kintsugi and traditional kintsugi, and I share the history and amazing qualities of urushi and its craft too in the Japanese culture. So I think it's important to educate the differences and the limitations. And as long as you know the differences, you know the limitation of modern kintsugi, I think it's totally fine to start with that. Yeah. While modern kintsugi might not be the authentic method, if you're sharing the principle of embracing the brokenness in the context of their own life journey, it can be a very powerful tool. So I don't think there's anything wrong with using simplified kintsugi to embrace that. So, not everyone wants to be an urushi expert, I understand. So some people just want to experience it, and modern kintsugi does lower the bar on entering into the craft of Japanese lacquerware. So, who knows, some people might want to learn more about kintsugi and go deeper later on. But yeah, so in that sense, modern kintsugi is a very effective entry point, so to speak. But yeah, but my ultimate message is that I want more people to learn about traditional kintsugi and the culture and story behind it, and about urushi, because it's urushi industry is actually declining in Japan. So many tool makers are struggling to find next generation who will take over the business and things like that. Most of them are like you know very small family business, and they work long hours and they don't make a lot of money. So young people
No,
don't
they,
want to take over the business, and they
yeah.
get better paying job in the big cities and
In the
stuff.
big city,
So
yeah. So like a lot of work for not so much money. But
uh,
I can totally appreciate this intersection between traditional and modern. And to your point, if a modern kintsugi vessel can bring people into the art form and they want to dive deeper and try to bring the kintsugi spirit forward in their lives, then I think that's a good starting point. And I just love what you shared about we're trying to create something new here. The old vessel before it was broken was beautiful, and this new one that we're creating is also beautiful, but just in a
mhm.
different way. And we're not trying to go back. But I do want to underscore before we wrap up what you're also bringing to the conversation, which you just said was because a lot of times we can look at the bowl, the vessel, and our attention goes to the gold and to
Mhm.
the gold highlights,
Mhm.
but we don't necessarily appreciate the urishi that actually helped connect the bowl in the first place, right? That the urishi actually sort of, in some ways, goes a little bit deeper, and the gold is there on the surface, mixed in, of course. But just, I love the attention, Miya, that you're bringing to the tradition of urishi and just how precious that is. And I love that. So I want to thank you for coming on and doing this. Was this your? I'm not sure how many podcasts have you done in your life.
Oh, this is my first.
This is your first one. This is so cool. That was so like you did an amazing job. I just love it. And so, and I'm gonna in the show notes we'll put all the different ways that people can connect with you, and if they're out in the California area, maybe take one of your workshops. But I so appreciate you coming on and sharing the story of Kintsugi, and I'm so glad that we now too are connected like a beautiful vessel. So thank you so much, Miya.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
That was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Miya. I hope you'll check out her website and her Instagram. And if you're out in the California area, I hope you'll take one of her courses to learn a little bit more about Kintsugi. Of course, with this podcast, I love the symbolism of Kintsugi. For me, it illustrates my recovery. It illustrates recoveries all over the world. So I love the fact that we had a chance to dive deeper. And I appreciated how she talked about the urishi, something that we normally don't talk about when we talk about Kintsugi. So I hope you're taking away a little bit more information about Kintsugi. You can be a little bit more dangerous at cocktail parties. You can wow your friends with this beautiful art form and philosophy. And you can bring it into your company cultures. Because even though we go through change, even though we might break or crack, all of us can find a way to come back together. We can create a more perfect union and celebrate our scars as golden symbols of strength and resilience. So Miya, thanks again for joining. Now that you're a podcast pro, I expect to see you, or actually hear you, everywhere talking about your art. And I also want to thank you for listening. I know time is your most precious resource, so the fact that you carved out some time to join us here on the Kintsugi Podcast means the world to me. And if you haven't yet left a kind review wherever you happen to listen to the podcast, I hope you'll do it today. It helps others find the podcast and our Kintsugi spirit. And until next week, let's celebrate our scars as golden symbols of strength and resilience. You've got this, and we've got you. Thanks for listening. I love you. This episode is brought to you by Pause, Breathe, Reflect, the app that can help bring more mindfulness to your everyday moments. Imagine what would be possible if more people could live more mindfully.